Hey, thanks for joining us. No like 10-minute countdown today, so we got to jump right into it. Not that I threw Mike McAmeel under the bus because he got here at the last second.
You did. You got it.
You're always doing 20 things.
I'm sharing things.
I'm going to count on the technical guy in the corner to make this work. So there's 3 of us today, 3. And with us, we have a very special guest. I'm super excited. First Assistant Linn County Attorney Nick Maybanks. Thank you very much for coming, Nick.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
As always, we have Mike. If we have time for anything that me and Mike care about, we can talk about it at the end. I just want to get diving into things going on in Linn County. So first of all, for the people, even just like me a couple years ago, what is it you do? Let's talk about what you do.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm a criminal prosecutor at the bare bones of it.
Sure.
My title is First Assistant Linn County Attorney. That basically means that our elected official, Jerry Vandersand, the Linn County Attorney, gets to choose just like the other departments of the county do. His first deputy,
Sure.
That's me. So
Sure.
when he's gone, I'll fill in for him. I'll do his role.
Sure.
There's a lot of hats that I wear too as the first assistant. I have a lot of communication with law enforcement about the cases as they're being built up, and I also have a full caseload as well. So I've worked my way up. I've been with the county attorney's office. This will be I'm in my 18th year
Awesome.
right now.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. It's weird saying that.
That's
I
a
still
lot of
like
cases.
That's a long time to be anywhere.
Yeah. Well, it is a lot of cases, and I would not even be able to put a number on how many cases I've prosecuted. I've thought about it, and it's well into 5 figures worth of criminal prosecutions. So
you and I were talking about when I recently went and sat in on a murder case. You and I talked about having to interact with, and I shouldn't say having to, victims' families and stuff. They come to you, what's going on, how's this going? Like you said, is a lot of people think it's like the movies where, oh, Nick has a murder case, so Nick 24/7 works on this murder case, and I understand it honestly from the victim's point of view of how important it is to them and that they want justice for this. But so totally without warning you, what's your caseload right now?
okay, so I don't have a raw number for that. I have a guesstimate, and usually the felony attorneys run at a caseload of, I'm going to say, around 85 to 100 ongoing felonies, and that'll be the cases that are pending, the criminal cases that have not reached a resolution yet.
Sure.
Okay, so if you want to add into that the fact that it seems like cases, especially felonies, never die in our neck of the woods.
Yep.
We also oversee the folks that are on probation. So
Sure.
if somebody's on probation, screws up, gets arrested for revocation of probation, we have hearings on that as well.
Sure.
There are numerous cases that are under investigation that we're working on, that we're considering at any given time. There's cases that are on appeal that we don't have a lot to do until they come back. Hopefully they don't come back, but we're talking numbers of, I'd say 200 is not anything that's too off on that. For felony attorneys. Now, misdemeanor attorneys have even more.
Sure. So it's not like the movies where they're walking through the DA's office or whatever on TV and there's your name and then the case of the victim / offender, and that's the one thing you're working on, right?
Right, yeah. Most of our cases aren't resolved within an hour either.
Yeah.
Like they are on TV, and that's kind of one of the things we always educate juries on. And the potential jurors are always say, yeah, we realize that, but we're not quite so sure of that sometimes. And also dealing with victims' families too. We don't like to drop down and say, this is how much we're working on as an excuse.
No.
Be perceived as an excuse not to.
Yeah.
But I think explaining that reality does also help explain the results that people see that are reported on, or when people start looking to themselves.
Sure.
That it's not always going to be that ideal situation where, like, you see Jack McCoy getting signed a murder case on Law and Order, and I just dated myself because I don't think he's around anymore.
Yeah, I don't know. I was watching one of those shows this morning.
Yeah.
And I was just laughing at the ridiculous detective with the, leather holster, like practically in his navel and his badge. I'm like, they don't do that, man.
Yeah, they don't do that.
Nor does Jack McCoy.
Right.
Right. And also we don't sit around and drink brandy and scotch and talk about our cases.
Yeah, exactly.
Overlooking city nightlights either.
That would be nice.
It's more like a cup of coffee at a coffee shop on a Sunday afternoon when I can actually get time away to get some work done.
Because there's no coffee shop in the courthouse.
That's true. There's
Whoever
not.
can fix that out there, make that happen.
Yeah, or maybe an energy.
If you sold Monsters, I could have stayed in that court. I could have been there all week if they sold Monsters.
And then we'll have an insulin machine next to it for you.
Yeah, I was just at the doctor today, and he said, hey, quit smoking, and you're fat. So I like it when doctors are straightforward.
And he charged you like $300 to tell you that?
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
I could have told you that.
I normally pay
doctor?
more. I normally pay more to be treated that poorly in Vegas.
I know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You just
You're fat. Quit
Yeah.
smoking. So I'm going to work on that. That's my goal. You're going to go to like 4 more instructor schools this year. I'm just going to lose weight and quit smoking. That's my
right.
simple goal.
Isn't that pretty much the solid male health advice you can give to adult males?
Well,
for
yeah.
the most part.
Yeah.
And
When they
don't
point
eat
at the
too much
BMI
and
chart,
stop smoking.
I'm literally supposed to weigh 71 pounds less than I do. So
right, yeah, I'm with you.
I could have like a mini me, I guess, apparently. So
Yeah.
The people that make those charts are the same ones that recommend serving sizes on potato chips.
yeah,
So
yeah.
That's all a racket by the insurance companies, by the way. I'm
Everything's
putting on my tinfoil hat right now.
everything's a racket.
It's definitely a racket by the insurance
Can we just talk about
companies.
this all day? I'm good.
We could.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I get it.
If he didn't warn you, we go off on tangents a lot.
I've noticed that. Getting to know
Yes.
Ernie the last few
I
months.
have made more notes. I know you were driving, so I didn't talk to you. I've made more notes today between pictures and screenshots of how to try to stay on target because I'm all over the road with this stuff. Speaking of which, so I sat in that murder trial. I'm gonna go right into this. I sat and listened to the Martin murder trial slash I say murder trial, self-defense trial. It was one of the things I heard very clearly from his defense, and so this isn't like hearsay or anything. This people can go back and buy the records if they want to. One of the defense. What am I saying?
Attorneys?
Yeah, well, his defense attorney, yes. They tried to use defensive property. So I want to clarify right now, for the good people to listen to our show, if someone is merely stealing your possessions, can you use deadly force when people are just stealing things you own?
I can't give legal advice.
No.
No, I would say
Let
that
me ask you
because
this. Is it a bad idea?
It's a bad idea, and let me explain that. It's not cut and dry, but the general answer to that is no.
Yeah.
Because the legal analysis of defensive property is not going to necessarily start with your property.
Yeah.
Because under the law, if you're just going to say, well, I saw somebody and he was stealing something, let's say, you're out in the county and you see somebody out in your shed roaming around stealing stuff, but they're a great distance from you, so they don't pose a personal threat to you, you can't just start firing at them.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
That defensive property isn't going to work. If somebody is inside your house and it looks like they're stealing things from you, that's where it gets a little bit more kind of mushy there. What the analysis comes down to really is you're going to have to be able to, at a later day, articulate that you had some kind of fear for your safety, for your personal safety, your health, or safety of others.
Yeah.
So
I get that. In my class, I try to make, people don't like it, say, oh, I'm just supposed to let this guy steal my stuff. I'm like, well, yeah.
Yes, you are.
Yeah, yes, you are. As in, let alone legally let them steal your stuff, who cares? It's like, it's back to the idea, what are you willing to die for? If you want to go outside and get killed because somebody's stealing your Harley, you died over your Harley. That was dumb.
This is the number one issue I have with the gun community. The amount of people that are willing to say,
we're stirring the
I'm
pot
stirring
now.
it right now because it makes me mad. The amount of people that do not represent us well by saying they'd smoke somebody over their truck.
Yeah.
And there's a guy in Texas right now that wishes he had his son back.
Was it Texas or Alabama?
It was Texas, I believe, that he did exactly that.
He shot the tailgate.
The fleeing truck killed his own son who was just borrowing the truck.
Yeah.
Because he could. Because in Texas, I believe it's okay to do that in certain circumstances.
It's never okay.
Well,
Let's just
I'm
say
saying
it's never
legally
okay.
allowed.
Yeah.
But there we go. Could versus should. Just because I can doesn't mean I should do it.
Yeah.
It's never. I'm gonna tell you right now, it's never a good idea to use deadly force against someone over stuff.
Yeah.
And people are gonna say, "But I work hard for all that stuff." But just like Nick said, then you need to articulate why you're in fear for your life. It's different if they're in your house and your daughter that's 4 years old is on the other side of your TV. That's that's a different scenario.
Yeah,
But,
well, he said the key thing, because I've seen it happen in class 50 times. People are like, well, what about a guy inside my house stealing things and now he's walking toward me? I'm like, are you worried about your TV right now? Well, no, of course not. I'm worried about myself. That's a different situation.
So then you move to your barricade point and
Sure.
you call 911 and you do all the things that we talk about a bazillion times. But
but you're not shooting somebody over your TV.
No,
at
you're
that
not
point.
shooting somebody over your TV.
And don't but it's I've seen it in the heat of the moment. If an officer shows up wearing an audio camera, right, video audio, and says, hey, what the hell went on here? Well, that guy was stealing my TV. Well, that's the first thing you say. I understand the way your brain works, Did you shoot him because you're stealing your TV? Where if you think about it, say, hey, what went on here? This guy, I caught him stealing my TV and yelled at him, and he charged at me, and I couldn't go any farther backwards down the hall. Well, now there
you're
you
in a
go.
different scenario. Then,
I think it was
right?
that word he said where articulate.
Right, exactly.
I don't know if you've ever heard that before.
A lot of people have problems with that. Let me give away a little secret here.
Let's do it.
So I went to Drake Law School. Okay, and I'm
That's
not
a
going to
secret?
complain right now about the people. I'm getting there. It's an Ernie story.
Okay,
I guess.
I like it.
So what I'm saying, I paid a lot of money that I'm still paying back. But
Sure.
next March, I make my last student loan.
Nice.
Good for you.
On my 19th year as a prosecutor. So I paid a lot of money over the course of 3 years and listened to a lot of professors talk about a lot of concepts in criminal law and a lot of theoretical situations. And they could have really cut to the chase had they just said, hey, when it comes to criminal law, especially this area, what does reasonable mean?
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to.
Oh, man.
I mean, they could have had just maybe one class and say logic, common sense, reason. And no matter what happens to the gun laws, what the legislature does with the gun laws, what people perceive
Sure.
they've done, nothing has extracted reason from the law. That's what it comes down to. And so where we're at right now is, let's go back to the property issue here. It comes down to reasonable force. Is it reasonable in response to somebody who's going out the door with your TV, they're already leaving, whatever it may be, to shoot them?
No.
It's
isn't.
probably not going to be reasonable. Now, there is, like I said, fuzzy, because I want to make sure that I clarify this here, that the term deadly force. So you're talking about you have to use force that's comparable to the force that you're threatened with.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
Okay?
Yeah.
So that's the way reasonable force will be interpreted, and that's
Sure.
the way deadly force will be interpreted. Deadly force is going to be interpreted as being reasonable if it's in response to a like force or threat. For the most
Absolutely.
part. So the law has some presumptions, though, now. And so under 704.2a, for instance, a person is presumed to reasonably believe that deadly force is necessary to avoid injury or risk to one's life or safety, or the life or safety of another, if the person against whom force is used at the time, so this is the burglar or whatever,
Sure.
is doing any of the following: unlawfully entering the dwelling, place of business or employment, or occupied vehicle of the person using force by force or stealth, or has unlawfully entered by force or stealth and remains within the dwelling, place of business or employment, or occupied vehicle of the person using force.
Sure.
So that does give a little bit more. I don't want to invite this. That's my problem
No.
here, but I want to be accurate about the law. That gives a little bit more, I think.
I know you don't want to say leeway,
Presumption,
but
not leeway.
sure.
It's
If I
presumption.
sneak, if
So
I
you're
sneak into your
presumed-
house through at 2 a.m. through the window, I'm probably not your friend.
right?
Yeah, unless, like we
Law-
lecture people, hey, do you have a teenager like I do? You better make sure they're not doing teenager things,
Right.
like their friends sneak over. Not
Right.
that it ever happens.
And that's really the issue that there needs to be a lot more education discussion about. Is you're not always going to be right about that. It might be your own kid. It might be the drunk neighbor who forgot.
Sure.
Is so drunk doesn't know where they live, tries to go into the wrong house and says, "Oh gosh, I gotta go in
Mike,
the window
And
now."
that's why I advocate.
Be
Have we
reasonable
ever
about
said
it,
exactly that in class?
Yeah, no, we have, and that's why I advocate to kind of err on the side of caution, I guess, and not just go have it like this is my line in the sand, and maybe the leeway goes. And I'm going to get killed for this. The leeway goes to the bad guy until you can establish that you have an absolute.
There you go, being articulate.
Yeah.
Until,
But what if you like you said is if and when I say my options, we don't know. It's 2020, right? You never know what, and nobody knows all the details till it's all over.
every situation is different.
But if it's people, 22-year-old son killed by his own dad this year, wife killed by her own husband, coming home overnight, rattles the door, kid wakes up the dad and says, hey, somebody's trying to break in, shoots his own wife. All those things have happened in the last 6 months. So when you say err on behalf of the bad guy, if it's be cautious, wait, and maybe end up getting injured instead of shooting my own 17-year-old son, then yeah, that's the answer.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. And leeway may not be the right word. I think cautious might be
Sure.
Get your ducks in a row. Make sure you have all the information. Don't go off half-cocked. Have a plan. Because you only go off half-cocked if you don't have a plan.
Yeah.
So people that hear the rattle at the door and they don't have a home safety plan
Sure.
or a barricade point, or they haven't told their kids where to go or how to call 911, then they panic, and then their only response may be a deadly response, they think.
Yeah.
because they don't have any other options.
Got to have other options.
Yep, for sure.
I like it. He has a lot of highlighted things. What are some of them? I'm excited. Highlighted laws.
Well, I was planning on just having it in response to a question.
Okay.
I don't know if you want to read all the boring
No,
highlights, but
but
this is the
We
stand your
actually,
ground
we
law.
actually
and-
read
Stand your
the
ground.
whole law one time
Let's-
here on this show.
Yeah.
What? Okay, so you're not giving. It's funny. I like what he said. I can't give legal advice. So, I understand why he can't. But let's say this:
Lawyers are always qualifying everything they say.
what did stand your ground change, and what did it not change in Iowa on July 1st?
That's a really good question. So, I would say that the bare bones of what constitutes self-defense is still going to be interpreted as being reasonable force.
Sure.
Okay.
I still have to articulate to you why I felt it was okay for me to shoot that guy.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yep. Yeah.
Or girl.
Absolutely. And I guess I'll answer that from an interesting viewpoint that maybe has not been considered.
I want to hear it.
And something that we saw pop up in discussions before the Martin case, which I talked to you about, Ernie.
Yep.
And that's about the requirements that the Stand Your Ground law puts on people that use deadly force.
Sure.
Which has and can, in some certain instances in the future, backfire on folks that think that stand your ground is this sort of like liberal use of guns that people are going to be able to have now. And so the stand your ground law actually requires folks to, now turn over to law enforcement authorities immediately the weapon that they use to defend themselves. And to allow that weapon to be examined and to immediately report it to law enforcement.
Can I jump
Deadly
in?
force.
And I don't want to have
Jump
you lose
in.
your train, but I want to ask a question because I actually just learned something. I always assumed that was a given, like you had to do that. Was that at some point not the case where you had to turn that over?
Well, in the stand your ground context, that's where it's new.
Okay.
Is that folks who want to believe that they have this sort of infinite stand your ground authority to shoot and then just leave are now being informed here. Well, if you're going to allege stand your ground, you have to do it by the rules. And that's what we found kind of happening with some of our more recent cases here is that, when people who use guns to defend themselves in a gang shootout or during a drug deal or what have you are now thinking, I've got stand your ground. Well, you didn't follow the law.
Right.
You didn't turn in your weapon. You didn't, subject it to examination. You didn't report it to law enforcement authorities right away. And so the question we're going to be faced with now is, do you get to use all of the benefits of stand your ground? You don't have to retreat, those type of things that we saw stand your ground do if you didn't follow the rules involved in it. And that's a pretty unclear answer right now.
Mike,
So
I
still
want
gotta
you,
get- go ahead.
after 22 years in the military, 14 years in the special forces, you have special perception. Some people don't. You heard him
I also
say
got trifocals.
you heard him say the word gangs, right?
Yeah.
So I don't want people to say they never call them gangs. So he just said gangs. So there are some gangs around. You're right, Nick. I found it interesting. This is my own personal opinion. Of course, I don't give legal advice. The first 4 cases, I saw the word "stand your ground" brought up. Like not just I wonder what they'll do. The first 4 cases, it's like none of those. You had the Waterloo guy who got in a fight over the fruit snacks in the front yard, left, came back with a gun, sorted out some things. Well, he's in prison. The case over in Des Moines was a female who shot, I think, her own father-in-law in their basement of their house, which that's, inside your house, you don't need stand your ground anyway if you were doing the right thing. It's been kind of interesting. I saw that they brought it up. Of course, the Lamar Wilson case is still going on, whatever. I don't even know where that's taking place or Johnson County, whatever. It's been interesting. And I watched where they're trying to, he's not going to be able to use that, I don't think. I think they've already sorted that out. But you're right. I get very worried with the gun community, like Mike said, that, stand your ground means this, this, and this. And I'm like, no, you don't get to shoot people and say, well, I was just kind of worried he was maybe going to hurt me. No. No, you don't have to run away. Sure, you don't have to tell Nick anymore why you didn't run away. But that's back to, like Mike says, when we teach people about the need to shoot someone instead of you can shoot. Like legally I can shoot them, but did you need to? It's like if I can get away without shooting anybody, that's the answer. And I'm not throwing the whole gun world under the bus, but you hear a lot of bravado in the gun world, true, right?
Absolutely.
When you say, I could smoke that guy and sleep like a baby. Well, you might legally be able to shoot that guy, but hey, your 5-year-old's home. And wouldn't it be nice if your 5-year-old didn't have to see that kind of violence or live through that? But, again, we're different, right, Mike?
You're definitely different.
So these requirements that the person using deadly force shall not intentionally destroy, alter, conceal, or disguise physical evidence relating to the person's use of deadly force, shall not intentionally intimidate witnesses into refusing to cooperate. Well, they can't do that anyway under the law. That's called witness intimidation.
Throw your pistol in a river.
Yeah, or destruction of evidence. So these things didn't change, but the interesting, or they're not new. They've been incorporated into the self-defense law. 704.2b, effective July 1st of last year, of 2017.
Yes.
So that kind of answers your question, Mike, that this is a new duty as it applies to the use of deadly force.
Sure.
So the folks that wanted to get the stand your ground put in for their reasons also, had this as part of their proposal here too, to make sure that guns were used in a responsible way. So
if I shoot
this
somebody,
perception out there about stand your ground and what it means to some people,
Yeah.
and that it was, I don't want to say all bad, because that's all viewpoint, or all good. That's all viewpoint that, as a personal opinion, folks have. But it does add some interesting components that I don't think people realize about it. There are also some things that are a little scary too, to some people here. And I'm not talking about that you have no duty to retreat necessarily, but that is 704.1. A person who is not engaged in legal activity has no duty to retreat from any place. That's essentially stand your ground.
Sure.
Right there.
Yep.
The law used to require that the person, if able, to take some kind of alternative course of action, but nobody was ever required to leave their own home.
No.
And that's something that you talk about, Ernie, in your class as well, that I picked up on.
Does that mean you've taken my class? I didn't know.
I have taken your class,
okay, I didn't know
and
if
you
we
were
allowed to
about
say that.
98% accurate about what you said, so I'm impressed about that.
It's all right.
That's
all right.
Maybe that's
There's
a
still
little
a
generous
chance.
on
That's what you're saying. No, but you're right.
Right.
It's what drives me nuts too is, so you get stand your ground pass, and this is, I'm going to say, some gun people on social media, they're like, yay, we have stand your ground, now we just need a castle doctrine. And I'm like, you're not helping. We've had a castle doctrine. It's at the bottom of 704.1. It's been there for how many decades? We have a castle doctrine. And so
You're talking specifically in Iowa, just to make that clear. For
In
our
Iowa.
international viewers.
Oh, yes. For the one guy that's in Uzbekistan right now.
Right.
So
You don't know.
there could be a guy in Pineland listening.
I know there's guys in Pineland listening.
But yeah, it's just interesting to me that it's like, don't go out there and say, great, we have this law, now we need this other law, and we've already had it, which means you weren't aware of it, which means, and a lot of people, they don't need to know anything more about laws. Even on, I think one of our posts, I showed it to you yesterday, right? The guy that's just like, I know everything I need to know about use of force. Okay. I'm glad you stated that publicly. I hope you never mess up.
I saw that.
Yeah. And it's fine. I don't care, because
Can't claim ignorance of the law anymore, then, I guess.
yeah, and like I tell everybody lovingly in class is, once you leave here, when I say I don't care what you do, you're responsible for you. I'm going to look out for me and my own. I'm going to worry about what I do. But if you do something wrong, you were told the right thing, but it's up to you to act responsibly.
One more thing I want to just talk
I love
about,
it.
as long as we're, because
Lay it
I
in
know
there.
we're going to switch topics the way you were.
Never. I'm going to stay on there. I'm going to, whatever you want to talk about.
A person, this is 704.1 too, a person may be wrong in the estimation of the danger or the force necessary to repel the danger, as long as there is a reasonable basis for the belief of the person and the person acts reasonably in response to that belief. Now, what does that mean? Again, that's something that's going to be subject to some interpretation over time. That can be a little bit of a frightening specter, though, when you think about the fact that all of a sudden people can be wrong. Well, is that really a change? I mean, if you're acting underneath a reasonable basis and doing what a reasonable person would do under those circumstances, and you're wrong, well, that's you haven't broken the law. But then writing into that you may be wrong, how far is that going to be interpreted? And what kind of, here again with the word leeway, what kind of leeway do people have when they look at this law and say, oh, I could be wrong?
Yeah.
Well, geez.
You better not be too wrong.
I'm not going to analyze the situation as much as I used to, because, hey, I could be wrong.
Yep. Well, there's wrong. Here it's sad that we use like movies. We use modern movies to educate people sometimes, and I'll say that carefully. Is, you know what? You try to explain to people what a furtive movement is, and then you're like, "You ever seen Gran Torino?" Well, yeah, that was a furtive movement.
Get off my lawn.
Yeah, he didn't have a gun in the hand, did he? So, I can see people being wrong, as in if somebody shows up and verbally says, "Hey, I'm going to kill you," blah 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 blah, and they go to reach inside their coat, right? And somebody shoots that person. That's where, in my opinion, which means nothing I know, that's where, yep, you were wrong. He didn't have a gun. But is it reasonable? Yeah. He made a motion that looked like grabbing a weapon that was very consistent with somebody grabbing a weapon. After he made verbal threats to you, I can go with that kind of wrong. Now, the public, of course, they don't you're never allowed to be wrong, right? Because hindsight's 20/20. You know, a lot of armchair quarterbacks, which I've seen in this town.
Yeah.
But
Just a few.
it was interesting. I'm glad you said you were in class because it was one of the things I think people think I'm kidding about, and it was awesome now that you said you were there, is when I try to explain to people what jury selection's like. You know, like, you think you're going to have a jury of people like you? No, you're not. And I think your words was, it's more, you know, it's even harsher than that. You know, like, being a juror, people, they don't realize what they're up against in a big case, like a murder case. And I don't want to say any case isn't important. They're all important, but they're going to sort out your feelings on self-defense, or, you know, do you even own a gun? Do you have a carry permit? You ever, you know. Shane,
So we got some questions here.
Shane,
And I
you
saw
have to
that
keep
someone
on
was
top
having
of
a hard
this.
time hearing me, so I will do better. And if Mr. whoever said that wants me to
Oh, Vent and
repeat.
Storm.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. How's that? Okay.
When
All
you
right.
when you were reading the law,
Okay.
you were getting quieter. As
That's
you were-
because the law is mucky, not me. Murky.
Hey,
Same
here's
thing.
two good things. I love this idea. So, Sergio, hey, buddy, do you still get to claim stand your ground if you are illegally using the gun, meaning if the person is a felon or without a clean background? So let's just go with felon in possession of a firearm. First of all, a felon in possession, tell me if I'm wrong, a felon could be in possession of a gun. Of course, all those things are illegal. But if someone shows up to murder him and his family, he still has a right to self-defense, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. However, Sergio, based on like maybe a case I listened to lately, if you're someone who's a prohibited person carrying a gun illegally, it usually doesn't work out well for you to take it to do your drug deal, to protect your drugs, defensive property.
So, and Doug's asking.
Don't modify your trigger, Doug.
Yeah, don't modify. But he is asking, though, just for
Legit.
everybody's knowledge.
I get it.
What kind of scrutiny would you be under if you have some kind of modified, I'll just say component, in any handgun or anything that you may use to defend yourself, understand your ground, or really in any self-defense scenario?
Well, I think to answer that, I think I might need an example of what.
Well, let me put it to you this way, Doug. He's sticking with the word trigger. Does modifying your trigger have anything to do with your right to save your life or not? No. Does making aftermarket unneeded modifications to something like in your trigger open up a can of worms that would
I think
never
where
be
Doug's
there?
going, Nick, just to kind of maybe clarify,
Yeah,
is,
'cause
does it make you look, in the eyes of the law, more, I'm going to say, bloodthirsty or willing to inflict harm on somebody if you take a trigger that's a 5-pound trigger pull and you modify it to 2.5 to make it
see.
easier?
I see. I can't speak for every situation, but as a prosecutor analyzing a case put in front of me, and those were the facts, and I was being asked to consider that as an aggravating factor, I probably wouldn't give that any extra weight, unless for some reason we could dig a little farther and find that that's the reason that was modified. So there could be a quicker pull or other bloodthirsty type evidence
Right,
like
right,
that, you know.
right.
But when it comes down to in any stand your ground analysis, it's not so much the mechanics of a firearm as it is the use of deadly force, the decision to use deadly force, whether it's 2.5 pound or a 5-pound trigger. You
I know Doug well
whether
enough.
it's a revolver, or an automatic, whether it's a shotgun, you know, it's all going to be the same.
I think some of these questions, or that question in particular, comes from there's a pretty high-profile case of a law enforcement officer, and this is totally different context, but still, he was convicted partially because he had a probably inappropriate phrase on the outside of his
You got to remember,
firearm.
he actually wasn't, I don't think he's convicted of anything.
Oh, he was fired, right? I stand
there you
corrected.
go.
He was fired, but he was not convicted. But anyway, they made a big deal at his trial because he did get charged with murder of. He had something on his trigger or his dust cover that's something
It
that
says
you're screwed or something like that.
Yeah, it was the F word. You're effed.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, okay, so if I'm going to shoot my rifle, you're effed. So, think about less controversy if you don't put that kind of thing on your gun. Don't put the cross of justice or the scales of justice on the side of your
Punisher.
Yeah.
Get the Punisher out there.
Stop it. Is that all the questions we have from today? I like it. I mean,
To go back to the question that we talked about the prohibited person.
Yes.
You know, there is some language in the law that talks about people that are engaged in legal activity cannot,
yes.
you know, claim the
Yep.
The self-defense. And there's also a specific citation to that when the defense is not available in Section 704.6. and it's not available to one who's participating in a forcible felony or riot or a duel.
Sure. Hey,
I'm just
we should
picturing
bring
like
duels
Alexander
back.
Hamilton and
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Aaron Burr here, or
Yep.
whatever. But
That guy was a badass.
Yeah.
He was.
the more
Well,
you learn about him.
Let's talk in simple Ernie terms, and I mean that not for my followers. Like I always tell people, I'm a high school educated guy. Let's make it simple, as I have my
From
other
Alabama.
monster from Alabama. Don't make fun of Alabama.
No, I'm not. National champions.
What you're saying, Nick, is I can't show up. Yeah, I can't show up with a gun and say, "Give me all your money," and point a gun at you, and then when you pull out your gun, being the victim, I'm like, "Oh my God, he was going to shoot me," so I shot him in self-defense, right? Because I'm participating in a forcible felony.
Right.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
nothing helps
That's gonna
somebody
be-
there.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's going to be very strictly scrutinized.
Yes.
The claims and that is a forcible felony, and it's about the proportionality of the force that you're faced with as well.
Sure.
I mean, if some obviously crazy dude comes up to you and your family on the street and pulls out a straw
Yeah.
and says, "Give me your money," and they're obviously drunk or something like
Yep.
that, you can't shoot that dude.
Yes.
That is not a proportionate exhibition
Yes.
of force. He might be a really scary guy, but that it's going to, again, everything depends on
I
the
like it.
circumstances.
I'm gonna
but
start
I
using
don't
the
really
straw.
I don't really like that as an example of being able to use deadly force.
No, because it isn't.
It's not proportionate.
I
to
think
it,
in my class,
you know?
I always use Hy-Vee feather
Right.
duster. I tell people, if some guy says he's going to cut you in half and eat you and he has a Hy-Vee feather duster, you don't get to smoke check him with your Glock and say, well, he said he was going to cut me in
Right.
half. Well,
Right.
it's not not willing or non-capable. Not capable. There you go.
It's going to be the elevation of the certain incident. Where did it reach to?
Sure.
And I found it interesting too. People think I have the law completely memorized.
No.
But
That's like people think you have one case.
exactly.
Oh.
Yeah, that's why I have my highlighted portions
I like
here.
it.
For
I
you.
like it.
And so, also in here, the defense isn't available when one who initially provokes the use of force against oneself by one lawful act is not going to. It's not going to be available if the person withdraws from physical contact with the other and indicates clearly to the other the person desires to terminate the conflict, but the other continues to resume the use of force. So, in layman's terms, or what have you, this allows somebody to check out of the volatile situation. So, I mean, if you are in a very combative type of situation, even gets physical, there's even the use of a weapon that's threatening. If someone withdraws from that, begins to leave, shooting that person on the way out is going to be very strictly scrutinized.
Can I expand on that a little bit?
Absolutely.
So does that
Yeah.
mean, and we talk about this in the past, you're the aggressor,
Okay.
and then at some point you become not the aggressor. You're like,
Right.
oh,
Get my
that
ass
was-
kicked,
That was
basically.
a bad move.
Is that okay to say?
Things severely escalated. I'm done. And then you
Right.
leave. And then if you feel that you're at that point threatened, you can become the victim, even though you might have been the aggressor in the situation.
Well, reclaiming your innocence.
Yes.
No, and I know where you're coming from, and yeah, you're right. Like guys in the bars.
I
that
guess I'm asking, is that what that's kind of alluding
That's what
to?
it refers to.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good example. Yeah.
Yeah, if you're gonna get all puffed up and shove some guy, you better really quickly say, you know what, I'm sorry, that was stupid, I'm leaving. Yeah, if that guy follows you out in the parking lot to try to kill you, now you could probably defend yourself.
When I used to have more just punch type trials,
Yeah.
fights, and now
Yeah.
everything I do involves a gun or a dead body or abused kid or something like that, it seems like. And they call that advancement in a career, I guess. But
Yeah.
in any event, when I used to do cases like that, and I'd love it when I'd have trials come up to talk to juries around football season, because I'd use the example of the recent Iowa State game where there's already this sort of like implied conflict between the Iowa and the Iowa State fan,
Sure.
joke, whatever. But the situation that starts fairly innocuously, but then gravitates out of control. Well,
Sure.
Somebody is getting irritated with the Cyclone fan, which I can understand, who's celebrating. I just offended most of the audience, half the audience, and doesn't like that the fact that they're celebrating the fact that they actually got a touchdown in a game, and so they throw some popcorn at him. All right. Well, Cyclone fan doesn't appreciate that. Maybe he flips some pop back there.
Yep.
Okay, that turns into a push, and then that turns into a punch, and that turns into a kick, and then the firearms get out. At that point in time,
Sure.
but you're not going to be able to get into Kinnick, but you get my point.
Absolutely.
For that, like at some point in time, the situation gravitates to where somebody's using a disproportionate amount of force, or someone has taken the step that takes that over the line to, hey, I'm just defending myself, to you just may have broken the law, buddy.
Sure.
Doing that. So.
Yeah. Carrying a gun, it's when I say it's this simple, there's plenty of bad drivers out there, but you start carrying a gun, I tell everybody, it's like, hey, are you a parent? Yeah, I'm a parent. It's like, did you change your driving habits when you started having a baby in the back seat? It's like, you better become a more responsible driver. You better drop your road rage and you're weaving in and out of stuff. And
Ernie, is it all right if we go to a couple questions?
I love questions.
All right.
Let's ask questions.
So everybody can hear me. Christopher, thank you. Eric, Doug, Vinton, thanks for tuning in. So Christopher Smith had a question. Would you encourage a person to lawyer up after a defensive shooting rather than make a detailed statement to law enforcement? Is what I'm assuming.
I'm interested in this
LE
answer.
Means.
Okay, so restate briefly again.
Would you encourage a person to lawyer
I
up
see it right
after? Yeah, there you go.
After a defensive shooting, rather than make a detailed statement to law. Well, you're asking a prosecutor. Do I want somebody to lawyer up?
I like it. We got to play devil's
advocate. I'm not saying
advocate.
that because I'm out to convict people. I think that it's very important to gather the suspect's version of events.
Sure.
And I can speak from a professional and personal standpoint with the amount of cases that I have reviewed that I've sent back to my law enforcement friends, and they understand this, who may be watching, and some of them are, that I will not proceed with a case if there has not been an opportunity to gather the suspect's statement.
Sure.
We're not looking just to drop the rubber stamp the victim's version of events or whatever it may be. We want to hear from the suspect, because if you don't hear from them before the case is filed, you're going to hear from a trial, maybe, if they decide to testify. So right not to. So you don't want to be surprised by it. And also, more importantly, you may find out that they didn't do it. They're not guilty. So I guess the easy answer to this is like, well, if you didn't do anything wrong, you ought to talk about it. But that's the easy answer that a prosecutor and police officer would use.
I don't know that Chris means it this way, but I'm gonna jump in and ask this: Do you look at it from the point of view that, hey, that guy from Cedar Outfitters got involved in a defensive shooting and he's got an attorney? Do you think it makes me look guilty to have an attorney?
I don't.
Yeah.
I don't. But I'm not.
I just
the
mean
typical
you.
person on
Sure.
that. I think that most people would probably come to that conclusion.
Most
and they
people,
shouldn't.
most
They
people in the
shouldn't.
public.
Right, in the public.
I only care what you
and
think.
this is a reason why we don't allow jurors to hear about that oftentimes. I mean,
Yeah.
it depends on the situation, but a lot of times judges will be real hesitant about letting jurors know that somebody lawyered up because of that implication that they must be guilty.
See, and that's sad in a way.
My viewpoint of that is that you're exercising your rights.
Yeah.
That I don't have a problem with that. That should be the case. And I know, Ernie, that you in your class do, if I remember right, you recommended that or said
Absolutely.
you should do that. And
Here,
I cringed a
generically,
little bit, but I understand your reason for that.
for all the people that didn't pay $100 to come to my class, here's what I tell them. The point being is, first of all, just to clarify, absolutely, if I get involved in a defensive shooting, what am I going to do? The same thing I tell everybody to do. Absolutely, we're calling 911 right away, as soon as I know I'm safe. Like seconds after I know, hey, no one's trying to kill me, I don't have to be putting a tourniquet on that lady, I'm calling 911 to get myself help, other people help, absolutely. Of course, I expect the police to take my gun from me. I expect to have the police show up, point guns at me, and handcuff me. I get it. Need to be prepared for that. But yeah,
You're supposed to do that in the law, too.
There you go. And so, yes, I want to give them facts. That guy over there did this to me. There's the motorcycle helmet he broke my window with. Absolutely, I'm going to point out facts. The difference is, and I don't want to speak for Chris, is I'm not going to give them my official statement. I'm not going to go right then and there down to the station and talk to him for 4 hours about it. I'm definitely going to point out, he's the bad guy. There's what happened. Those two people saw it. Of course you took my gun and all that. My personal advice is, I'm getting a lawyer, which I had already found, and I'll talk to him in a couple days after I've had time to process this. Because people get used to that idea of Mike went to whatever. Mike went to some new EMS training. So hey, Mike, come back and teach us what you learned, why it's still fresh in your mind. Well, Mike didn't think he was going to die the entire time he was in EMS training. So it being fresh in his mind is different than, hey, you just went through a life or death event. Why don't you tell us about why you still remember everything? That's not the way it works, and that's like science-y and facts. But I'm a huge believer that you better go home and get a couple nights sleep. You better be able to think clearly, and you will remember more later.
I can understand that.
Sure.
That makes total sense. And I think the idea of asking for an attorney doesn't necessarily mean that you're never going to make a statement.
Absolutely.
And some people, kind of have that idea too. Is once
Oh, because you heard in class, I said, officer, you'll have my full cooperation. I'll talk to you. You'll have my full cooperation as soon as I've spoke to my, counsel, lawyer, call it whatever you want. So yeah, I'm not saying I won't cooperate, but I am going to say, and I'm not lying, as in this is me personally, doesn't work for anybody else. I'm absolutely going to tell him, you know what, I want to be with my family and I want to go to the hospital because I don't want to come crumping down off this adrenaline rush.
I'll just say real quick for what it's worth, if I'm analyzing a case, that is not a factor at all. Well, this person asked for attorney, they must be guilty. It's like it doesn't even exist in the report. It's just it's just a fact. That's something I don't take under consideration because
it's good to know.
People should be able to do that.
Shane, is that on feed where everybody can see that question there, or is that just no? Okay, so Vinton Storm brought up.
We're gonna bring up facts and stuff.
Well, no, he's agreeing honestly, or you actually already answered his question. He asked, "What about the studies by Force Science Institute indicating it takes 48 or 72 hours after traumatic event to have full and accurate recollection?" And that's basically what you just said.
Because it's true.
Like, it's true.
It is true. It's like facts.
You start like the stuff that's filtered out. That your body didn't think was important at the time, like the color of the guy's shirt. Like, who cares what color it is when he's got a gun in my face?
Yep.
But you start remembering these things because you're still storing that information.
Yeah.
It's just not life-threatening at that point. So you start getting a full recollection of that event. So
yeah, that makes sense. It really does. And I wish I could explain that to juries in other scenarios, too, where, a victim's statements made at the time of an incident, which they have amended because they've experienced that recall, are used against them. Well, don't you agree that at the time of the incident occurred, your memory would be more fresh, your details would be more there?
It's bullshit.
And, well,
I get to say that. You don't. I get to say that.
Let's just qualify to this by the fact that for that study, I'm sure there's probably something else out there that says something different.
Well,
and unfortunately, that's kind of the world we live in. Is that you want to find an expert for something, you're going to find an expert for something.
Yeah,
sure.
When we're talking
pay
about that,
enough,
but I tend to think that sounds like a lot more reasonable. That study, a reasonable kind of reflection of the human ability to recall, based on my experience and so on.
Because you do have some experience. I want to go back 1 second. I want to go back to when he was talking about, let's talk about juries and let's talk about this idea. When you talked about using that force and no more or like force, whether, yes, you can fight deadly force with deadly force. Do you agree or not? This is totally this wasn't planned. Do you agree or not that there exists this thing that juries are like, oh, well, he only had a knife and you had a gun? Like they see this, like, oh my God,
disparity of tool.
There you go.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, aren't they both?
I just made that up. I'm patenting that.
Yeah, it's like they're both deadly. They're both deadly weapons if you use them. And when somebody says, "I'm going to kill you," and they have a knife, just because they have a knife and I have a gun doesn't mean I have an advantage. When we're talking like the distances that these things happen at. Mm-hmm. But do you ever see that in a jury that you have to explain to them that? First of all, here's the problem in the situation. How many self-defense trials where a good person had to shoot a criminal doing a criminal act have you ever even had come across your desk in your entire career? And I'm going to say he can't remember any. I'm just guessing ahead of time. And so
I've had a handful of maybe, I'll call them warrant requests, but can you take a look at this? Does it fit cases? Yep. I've never taken any to trial before I'm just thinking of a scenario where there was that set of those roles, maybe something that could be argued, but I'm not necessarily sure who was the criminal, who wasn't in that.
Yeah.
So packaging things up into this neat little picture, like, person in home, criminal comes in, how the roles can get fuzzy.
Sure.
So it's pretty rare, though. You would agree, maybe? Yeah, pretty rare.
Yeah.
And so, yes, we train, we talk about it. You call it steal it from Rob Pincus, whatever. You're training for an unlikely event, right? And I always try to clarify for people in class. First of all, it's rare to be in a self-defense shooting. And second of all, it's rare for it to ever actually go to court. But what I try to make clear to everybody is if you are that person going to court, it's not fun. But, I want to clarify to people that just like Rob would say, most people that defend themselves with a firearm had no official training either, right?
Yeah, that's most people. Most gun owners, honestly, don't spend a lot on training because it's a magic talisman and it's just going to ward off evil and...
Okay, I'm just saying.
Sorry, soapbox again.
So I'm not trying to scare everybody into, oh my God, you're never going to be able to save your life if you don't have training, and oh my God, if you ever shoot someone, you're automatically going to court, because that's not true. It's factually not true. The dispatcher that we used during our land the plane class,
right?
we have a real local police dispatcher. Has been there 35 years. And so it was interesting, unsolicited, with unplanned. I'm like, hey, how many times have you taken 911 calls and it was a shooting? You know, he's like, oh my God, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds in my career. And I'm thinking, how many times did, when the cops got there, it was a good guy that had to shoot a bad guy? Like a completely innocent Joe Blows taking the kids to Walmart and somebody, he's like, oh, never. So, you know, I understand that. I see the word self-defense shooting, you know, like everybody else in the paper. The Martin case was a self-defense shooting, as in you had to deal with it or your office or whatever, but it's really not the kind of things we're talking about when we say self-defense shooting.
No,
Right.
no. I can give you an example of a case. It's long into the books, but it's an interesting scenario.
Okay.
And the fella has now been released from prison because although he was originally convicted of robbery in the first degree and sentenced to 25 years with a mandatory 70%, he was a juvenile when it occurred. And because of recent developments in the law, there's giving a juvenile a mandatory sentence is no longer constitutional in Iowa. So he's been released. He's in the community now, I believe, on some supervised tasks. But in a nutshell, what happened is 17 years old, hanging around out at, I think it was Woody's, the strip club out on the southwest side of town, and was having trouble getting in, did get in, got kicked out, lingered around in the parking lot, and decided he'd just do some casing of the folks that were coming in and leaving, because obviously people go to strip clubs. Some of them come with money, some of them leave with money, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So he follows two girls that are leaving their shift as they get in the car with these two guys, their boyfriends. They head back to one of the hotels down on 33rd Avenue. He shows up at the door, and there's a lot of things about this case is weird, but just knocks on the door, okay? And for some reason, this is young minds at work here. The young dudes inside just open the door. No idea who this is at 3 a.m. in the morning. Yeah. But there's my guy, the guy who prosecuted, standing there with the gun. And walks in, starts pointing it around at people and saying, I want all your money.
Yep.
Well, when he's doing that and he's doing this kind of pointing around thing with the gun, one of the fellas sees an opportunity and knocks it out of his hand. Shots get fired out. One gets wedged into the nightstand, but what happens is they were able to actually get the gun out of his hand, seize it from him, and then he was still fighting with them about it and trying to reason with them as they were pushing out the door and saying, all right, I'll leave, and then reaching back for the gun. So it's an ongoing type of scenario. Well, the boyfriend of one of the young ladies who was dancing there shot him right in the groin. And so the call to the police was, oh my God, somebody got shot. They're bleeding. They're in agony. They're in the parking lot of this hotel. Yeah. And so pretty quickly, as the police arrive there, they think, well, obviously the guy with the gun and the one that shot, we have our shooter and our victim. Yeah. But as things were figured out and parsed out, we found out that, this was an attempted robbery. Now, there was never even a single contemplation in that scenario that the person who shot the guy could be prosecuted for anything. Yep. And so it was probably the worst day of that guy's life, because not only did he not get the robbery, not get the money, and got 25 years for it, he also got shot. Yeah, in some bad places. Bad day. Yeah. Right, very bad day. Yeah. So I guess I bring that up just as a scenario that, maybe I have had that sort of, good guy, bad guy, but it doesn't always unfold the way we think. Yeah, right. No, and actually that's a perfect story to explain to people that I guess what I'm trying to get in their head is, when you have cops around here, police officers, I don't mean that, just when you have law enforcement officers around here that all they ever go to is shootings that are illegal activity, that's why you need to be expected to be treated as in they're going to show up, point guns at you, tell you to go on the ground, take your gun away from you, handcuff you, because it's even rare for them to show up to the shooting where it's like, holy crap, this is just a guy who was attacked. And whether it takes minutes or hours or days or, whatever weeks it took for you guys to sort that out, it'll get sorted out. But that's where I tell people is, if you're going to carry a gun and think you can shoot people, then you better also tell yourself, I'm okay being handcuffed and I understand why they're doing it.
And you need to give those bits of information we already talked about a little bit earlier, and not run your mouth, because as we've established before,
verbal diarrhea.
People that run their mouth, what do criminals do?
They run their mouth.
Yeah. Right? Trying to distract law enforcement, and it just won't go well for you. You need to be cooperative, give the information that's appropriate, and be expected to be processed through the system, right?
Didn't Didn't somebody say in a movie once a man needs to know his own limitations?
Right.
So, all right.
So we got a couple questions. I got one on my super secret back channel here. So
Correct, Ernie. Correct, Ernie? Like fix me?
yeah,
'Cause
like
that's
you
impossible.
no, like you're.
No.
So Eric.
You said something right, I think. Is
Oh
what
my
that-
God.
So Eric Sismedia is asking if you have to use an NFA item
Like a
like
suppressor.
suppressor S short barrel rifle, would that cast any aspersions or make you look?
I don't even know if
I
Nick's...
think we kind of answered
I'm
that already.
going
Yeah,
to say I
it's-
don't know if Nick's enough of a gun guy, and I mean that lovingly.
Yeah.
Like, he...
I know what a suppressor is. I'm not
Yeah.
sure about the acronyms.
Sure.
there.
So the
honest with
SBR is just short-barreled rifles. So
Oh,
like,
sorry. Yeah,
So
of course.
no, and so so let me explain it. I understand what he's saying, which is, this guy who, first of all, I look at it and say, here's a guy that's filled out forms and waited a half a year from the ATF to say yes, you can own this thing, and paid an extra $200. Does that make him look like he has a killier gun, or do you obviously look at that and say this dude's passed like infamous background checks and he's on file with his fingerprints with the federal government? But I understand his point of view is, would a jury look at that and say, he has one of those like assassin guns from the movies?
All right. So
That's what you're stuck explaining to the jury.
the jury outlook and the prosecutor outlook are two different things. As a prosecutor, again, I'm just concerned with the law. Was it reasonable force? Was the deadly force used the right way? I don't
Yep.
care what you're using. If you're using a machete, if you're using a short-barreled rifle, if you're
Yep.
using an Uzi, whatever it may be,
Yeah.
did you use it the appropriate way? And to be honest, yeah, I'm not going to say there's not some juries that get a little weird sometimes and kind of lose their head, but for the most part, we've found with our discussions with jurors after verdicts that they really do analyze things from an objective standpoint, particularly in these type of cases. Now, where you get the motion in, maybe more with child cases, things like that, it's more possible. But when you're talking about two adults in a scenario where one's arguing reasonable force used in self-defense and the other's arguing that that wasn't, that was the victim of that, they'll try to look for the most objective evidence they can. And implying something off of the particular tool that's used, that's just not something I've seen that jurors have been inclined to do. And I would say that arguing that to the jury would actually, as a prosecutor, as a defense attorney, arguing that might actually get you less points, because that's something I think that a jury might be offended by.
Sure.
They might say, you think that I would take that under consideration? But before you said that, they might have. But then you know what I mean?
Right.
Sometimes juries like to reach their own
sometimes-
conclusions, not
yeah.
be told what to do.
I like how you put this the other day. It doesn't matter the case or the situation, but you can offend a jury, can't you? Like assuming that we have to explain this to you,
Yeah.
like, don't be racist, or don't be this, or don't be that. Well, and we've listened to a lot of professionals. You're a professional, so don't take that wrong. But when we pay and bring in people that from the self-defense point of view, that, like you said, that's all they do is, first of all of them would tell you that jury instructions on how to apply the law makes a huge difference. Mm-hmm. Do you believe that to be true?
Oh, yeah.
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 Like
They want to be instructed on the law.
Sure.
And that's what we tell them during jury selection is you're the judge of the facts, and the judge gives you the law.
Yep.
And the jurors don't want to create law. They don't want to make law. We see nullification tendencies, meaning that we don't care if someone's broken the law. We're still not going to find them guilty, but I can't point to many concrete examples of that. So they want to be instructed on the law, and they want to do it right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Maybe sometimes better than some people who are supposed to be following the law.
Yeah, it was super literally like I have all this extra time in my life. I don't want there to be another case like the Martin case. Like I tell people, I'm not saying, the next time somebody shoots somebody, but it's going to happen. We live in Linn County, Iowa. It's going to happen. But I am going to make time in my life to go do that more and more. That was interesting to watch.
Glad you did.
I know it's not that it's boring for you. What I mean is, it is your job. You have win or lose on the line, whether it's justice for victims and your reputation and truly justice what matters. But for me, I get to just sit back, maybe probably even different than anybody involved in it, like you guys, and just get to listen to what people say. Like, maybe you're more, you have to pay attention to what the other side says. Me, I can pay attention to both sides, and it was interesting to watch. But that case, first of all, it made it flat out like, by the way, we understand these guys are all doing drugs and they're all drug dealers. Get over that, move on. That's not what it's about. And even though through friends in law enforcement and just being aware of what's going on in this world, dealing drugs happens all the time in Linn County. It's just funny how they basically have to say, you need to become numb to that because it goes on all over the place. Let's talk about these other facts over here. That was like eye opening, just from like, you know, oh, and you bought the drugs from who, and they do it here, and how often did you go to that parking lot and sell them? You know, 3 days a week or whatever. It's like, it's going on.
Oftentimes we get jurors as an initial response to their duty. If I talk to them to say, I don't know how you deal with this every day. I'm glad to go back to my regular life. And I'm not trying to be like, oh, woe is me, I got the hardest job, whatever.
Sure.
But it's just, what I mean by that is jurors are exposed to a side of life.
They don't know
a lot of them have no idea. Like,
it's depressing.
I always talk to jurors in my voir dire, my jury selection process, about what their perceptions are of Cedar Rapids, and try to be, as without insulting their intelligence, as simple as I can. Do you believe that there are bad people in Cedar Rapids?
Sure.
Do you believe that people do bad things to each other? Do you believe that Cedar Rapids is still this town, the city of 5 seasons, city of light, whatever, you know, where
is it Mayberry?
We're not like those other towns. We don't have those problems, type of things.
Yep. Just
to get them in that mind frame, because I know they're going to hear some stuff that they're not used to. You know, they don't see it in their commute to work, or, you know, in the PTA meetings and things they go to, wherever it may be, all good stuff. They don't see that side of life where these things happen. So that's one thing I hear from almost every juror in a case like that. It's like, wow, thanks, you know, thank the cops, you know, for what they do, and I don't want to have to do this again for another 2 years.
Yes. Shane, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Nick,
Yes.
can you talk about the Iowa Supreme Court decision between Brown versus Iowa? Kind of tell us what it's about. Maybe tell us your thoughts on it.
Yeah. So that was if it's the one that I think you're referring to.
Yeah, the one I showed you.
That was just last Friday,
Yep.
and I did get a chance to read it, and it was brought to my attention by somebody with the Cedar Rapids Police Department Narcotics Bureau because of the concern of it. And I'll try to be brief, because I could go on and on about what the implications of this case and some of the trends we've been seeing. But what happened in that case was the police in I don't know what city it was off the top of my head. But
Did it happen in Iowa?
yeah, it was Iowa case.
Okay.
Yeah, right. So in any event, so the police applied for and executed a search warrant at a residence to look for, because of suspected drug activity there. A very standard type of warrant that we see on a regular basis here. We've got a suspicion there's drug activity here. We've been able to verify it. We've been able to give a magistrate probable cause to be able to issue a search warrant, to be able to go into a home and search for these drugs. And the language in there contains any and all items and containers in there that may contain drugs based on this officer's experience, you know, purses, suitcases, drawers, whatever, those type of things, and also persons that happen to be in the residence at the time.
Sure.
Now, the persons aspect of that has been criticized and scrutinized by the Supreme Court, maybe rightfully so, for being, you know, people that are in the wrong place at the wrong time, being searched just because they happen to be there. So there's some limits on that, but there hasn't been any issues before with containers that are found in areas where there could be drugs hidden and those type of things. So in this case, Miss Brown was in her home. Sorry, my bad. Not in her home. She was in a home of these other folks who were the targets of this methamphetamine investigation. And when the SWAT team came and they busted down the door and they put the people in custody and began searching, they saw a purse where Miss Brown happened to be. And Miss Brown was a friend who was visiting at that time, and looked in the purse and they found drugs and drug paraphernalia, those type of things. So seized that. She was charged with it. She challenged the search warrant. She said that she was just a guest there, and that the warrant was too broad to include her items, that the officers should have made some kind of determination on the scene as to whether should be included in the warrant or not, that it was her personal, you know, possession, and she's just a guest and those type of things. And so the Supreme Court found that underneath the Fourth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which is the guiding sort of principle of search and seizure, that there wasn't really a violation there, where the officers did what they, you know, could do, that the law allows them to do. But what we've seen the Supreme Court do in Iowa is use the Iowa Constitution to provide and afford more rights than what's given under the federal Constitution. For better or for worse, that's what they're doing.
Yep.
And so in this scenario, what they said is that that particular purse, that particular item there should not have been searched. It was a violation of the Iowa Constitution to do that the officers were required to make some kind of determination of who possessed that search or that purse before they went into it.
Looking for an ID inside the purse?
Right, which we're having to go inside the purse. I get it.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
All right.
so anyway, they found underneath the Iowa Constitution that was an illegal search, and so the majority of the Iowa Supreme Court said this is a violation of the Constitution, the Iowa Constitution. The dissent, and it's a very interesting thing going on with the Supreme Court of Iowa right now, is there seems to be blocks that are coming down on these issues together all the time. There's the majority now seems to be leaning towards this last decision and decisions like that.
Yeah.
And then the dissent in this case is saying, no, this is proper police conduct. They had a warrant. It was reviewed by a magistrate. That's what the Constitution requires. It's reasonable to think that a container inside a home that's being, investigated for drug activity would include drugs in that. Yeah. So this was proper for them to do that.
Sure.
So what the dissent pointed out is those things, but also the dissent pointed out that when they came in, Daniel Brown, the defendant in this case, was smoking meth.
Mm-hmm.
When they came in.
It's everyday thing.
So really, I found it
Monster.
curious, and maybe I should read the opinion closer before I say much more, I guess. But I find it curious that fact was left out of the majority opinion, because I think that would be, when you're talking about officers making a determination on the scene as to whether something's suspicious or not,
Sure.
the purse next to the person smoking meth may be a suspicious item.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
You may want to look in that for numerous reasons.
I mean, it might be considered logical.
Right.
So is that decision going to hamper law enforcement? Are they going to have to get, and I don't know a lot about warrants, but are they going to have to get way more detailed on what they're allowed to look for or
Well,
look
I think
at?
it is going to hamper law enforcement. I mean, and this is just, I just recently read the case, and I maybe need to digest it more before I say that. But but off the cuff here, qualifying it, my statement, obviously off the cuff, I think it will, because we're asking officers to do a lot already, and they do a good job of it. And we should ask officers to do a lot. They have a lot of power to go through people's things. So what we ask the officers to do before they search a house in this type of circumstances is to get a warrant. They did that.
Yep.
They ran it by the magistrate. Magistrate did his or her job, found probable cause. Everything written in the warrant was something that was connected, had a nexus to their investigation. What the Supreme Court said is that there should have been more done by the officers to determine whether this person had actual or constructive possession of that. So find out who Miss Brown is, ask her what she's doing there, presuming Miss Brown's going to talk to you about that, because she doesn't have to. That's all right too. And then ascertain then legally whether she had legal possession of that or not, and then not go into it if she did. I think it's asking a little bit too much of officers in that scenario, and they used the SWAT team aspect against them actually, and said, the fact that this is done by SWAT, well, they didn't have more of a chance to do this in a I don't want to say courteous way, but
I was going to say they probably
way,
kind of stereotyped the SWAT guys as being more aggressive, and they're not trying to do due diligence and all these things because hey, they're SWAT guys and they wear black Velcro stuff and body.
So let me ask you a random question then. Okay, do a lot of search warrants that involve finding drugs, like there was enough probable cause, the magistrate said, okay, we're going to do this. Do those drug cases turn up weapons?
Oh yeah.
So is there a lot of times weapons involved when it's a drug manufacturing or drug house, drug whatever suspected? Is that true?
Yeah.
So I just want to roll with that from the point of view that is who I would send. I would send the SWAT team when illegal drug activity often involves firearms.
Yeah, and I don't want to. Maybe this is me backing off a little bit. I don't want to act like I'm criticizing the Supreme Court about this.
No, you're saying
their
it's
role
interesting.
in the system, but honestly, I think it does hamper things for law enforcement, and I think that there is a lot that should be considered. And I'm sure they considered it, but people are going to be scratching their heads, and the person who asked this question obviously has an issue with it, and I'll be having to explain to law enforcement now, as I have had to do numerous times, why things that they have been able to do for years and could do are now not okay, and sometimes after the fact, after they've already done them.
And the officers did their job and did nothing wrong, so people could be like, why aren't we doing something about these bad guys? The police did everything they could. The Supreme Court decided this other thing over here.
That's our system. That's the role.
And you qualified it in the beginning, and I don't take it in a bad way. It's like, for better, for worse, this is what the Supreme Court said.
Right.
It could work out in someone else's benefit someday. Like, that's,
Well, someone who truly was there and not smoking meth.
Somebody was innocent. Right?
You know what I mean?
Sure.
Yeah, but
If
that
you're
person
just if
wouldn't
you're
have
just the
drugs in
Jehovah
their purse
Witness
either.
that happened to
so-
be at that
And they
door that
invited
day,
me in for tea.
Yeah.
I mean, and there I am.
and then the door got kicked in.
We were discussing local politics,
Yes.
and all of a sudden.
All right, let's see. I'm gonna stir the pot, okay? Because you brought up law enforcement stuff. So we have some is there any other questions first?
Yeah,
Shane?
we're
Jump me.
about two or three questions behind.
Well, then go with theirs.
Okay.
But I have some good ones. I get the last half hour.
Well, Chad Wagner asked, so what if I lie about that being my purse, being the guest to allow my guilty friends to get away with not having their items searched? Does that make sense? Did I read that correctly?
What does Chad know about criminal activity?
So Chad's saying if they use that Supreme Court decision to try to get out of getting searched through some sort of lie or whatever.
Yeah, I would guess it's like a
Okay.
loophole.
Right.
I'm sorry,
Right.
you can't search their stuff. They're a guest.
This is mine. I'm a guest here.
Right.
Well, that's a really good question.
That is a good
And
question.
I can't
Can you
say
not
for sure
search-
because I don't recall word from word the opinion, whether that scenario was addressed or not. And maybe the dissent took that up or should take that up as far as pointing out the impracticalities of making this hard, steadfast type of rule in these situations. But what the Supreme Court also allowed for was a consideration of circumstances. As well, and like we were talking about with the reasonable force and things like that, it's always going to depend on the circumstances.
Sure.
I can't ever give you a steadfast answer anything
No,
in law. Which
there's no
along with
100%.
teaching reasonableness in law schools, they should have taught you that you're not ever going to be able to give anybody a straight answer on anything.
No, I've never got a straight answer.
So I say that's a really good question, but I think the way around that a prosecutor that having to argue that or whoever may have to take that up would be to say, well, was there a suspicion that fabrication was being perpetrated? What were the circumstances of that? So I'd ask the officers, if you thought something was fishy, ask a little bit more.
I guess as the officers
things.
going in that room, I would also be concerned with who might be armed. Does that mean you can't search everybody if they just say, I'm a guest? You're not going to search that person for any weapons?
Well, that's a tricky issue too because I just handled a case the other day where there was a pat down that was done of an individual who was again there was like a canine hit and there was some drugs that were found as a result of that, and the suppression issue generally was that can the officer go into the apartment to secure the apartment if the individual says they don't want the officers to search, they don't give consent.
Okay.
And there's a Supreme Court case from 2011, State v. Watts, that says that basically said that marijuana is not volatile enough of a substance to justify an exigency necessarily, depending on the circumstances, to go in and secure a premises. So anything that takes place past that threshold after you've already been told you can't go in, even if the officer's saying, I want to make sure I'm safe, I want to make sure I pat down people, I'm leaving my partner here so I can go get a warrant, those type of things, is going to be strictly scrutinized. And in that State v. Watts case said that's not okay to do that. So basically you have to stage yourself outside the apartment unless you have some suspicion.
And nothing ever
somebody's-
happened. Nothing ever disappears as you stage yourself outside.
Well, it's like I told the officer, if you hear a toilet flush, then you might have some more grounds for it. But then then the argument will be, somebody was doing
I had to go to the
business,
bathroom.
right?
Yeah. I was so scared. I had to go pee
Yeah.
15 times.
And the
All
toilet
right.
overflew.
Yes. Okay, so in the world of law enforcement, we had somebody send me a question. So you're a police officer, Mike. Let's say this. Maybe this will be interesting to you. Oh, how do I read?
I'm already riveted.
No, you're going to like it. So let's say, so a domestic. When officers respond to a domestic and they find an injured victim, so there's an injury. Let's say they have it on audio and video, talking to and interviewing the person who created those injuries. Sometimes the cases, they get thrown out because, the actual woman or man, let's say either the person that got beat, the victim doesn't go forth and do anything. So this officer is like, hey, Iowa is a mandatory state, as in if there's an injury, we have to arrest somebody. But a lot of times those get dropped later. Can you tell me how that happens? Is that too big a question for today's show when you only have however many, 40 minutes left?
Well, I see we're running a little short on time, and I know there's some more topics you want to talk about, but I will address this. The fact that a mandatory arrest maybe law is different than a mandatory prosecution or a mandatory conviction because of it. And I'm sure this person asked that knows that, but there's a separation between what requires an officer to make an arrest and proving a case later on it. So it's not like the mandatory arrest law has a provision in there that says, and if the officer has grounds or is required to make this arrest because of an injury, then the jury shall hear the evidence. So you still have other hurdles there, and one of them is the confrontation clause of the U.S. Constitution that says that a person who's charged with a crime has a right to confront the witnesses against them. So you can't merely play a recording of a statement of a victim and not allowing the suspect or the defendant to be able to cross-examine that person. It's a pretty basic concept of the Constitution. Now, there are some ways around that in some scenarios. For instance, if a victim doesn't cooperate. So you could call the victim to the stand, presuming that you don't have knowledge that they're going to recant or whatever it may be, just to say, I was there, and then you subject them to cross-examination for that. Again, if you don't have some sort of knowledge that they're going to recant, that's a whole different issue that I won't talk about because we don't have time for that. But then you can proceed because you've subjected that person to cross-examination then. So then you can proceed by playing their previous statement if you can lay the foundation for other exceptions to the hearsay rule, that this person was excited when they made the statements. It's called an excited utterance. Or that it was a present sense impression, or you can call maybe someone that they made a statement to in the medical field, and that's a statement for purposes of medical diagnosis or treatment. So another answer to that question is that you can proceed with those cases without a victim if you have what's called an evidence-based prosecution instead. You have injuries, maybe an admission by the defendant, those type of things. You can actually proceed with those cases without the cooperation of it. So it doesn't happen all the time like that. Okay. It's just, you can only do so much that the law allows you, and the rules of evidence are different than the rules of mandatory arrest.
So I'm going to dive into, when I say how you and I met, I don't just mean it that way. Like, I reached out to you and said, I want to learn more about this. Let's talk about this. So this is my own personal story of interest and I speak for some other people when I say, do you understand people's frustration that they're like, hey, we have bad guys doing bad guy things in this town, and they never get like real time. They never go away long enough.
I've heard that a few times.
Yeah. Or it got pled down to next to nothing.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So, and I'll tell you right now, I still feel that way. Like it is, I'm not going to change how I
feel that way too.
Yeah. It's never going to change that I feel they get off too easy. But after talking to you and just watching one trial, and all I mean by that experience is watching what goes into it, is it safe to say people have no concept that the court, there's not enough hours in the day to get all this done? Is that true? You only have so many courtrooms, so many prosecutors.
I don't want to say as a generality that people have no concept. That seems a little harsh on the people.
Okay.
I get what you're saying, though.
Do they have a great
want to be insulting
misconception
to the people, but
of what goes in?
There's some conception of it, that there really is, and there's a mountain to climb to be able to get every step of the process done that people don't understand. They see, facts reported in articles, fair or unfair in some situations. Rendition of those facts and draw conclusions based on that, and that's human nature. That's a tendency we all understand. We see something, we're outraged about it, but the same folks that may be outraged by the fact that somebody, that a prosecutor gave a deal to somebody who was accused of shooting at a house, and they're doing 5 years instead of 10 years, or they're getting probation instead of going for a dime or whatever it may be.
Yep.
They may be the same folks that may show up as jurors and say, what are they prosecuting this case for? They don't have any witnesses.
Yeah.
They don't have any physical evidence. They don't have a confession. They don't have DNA or all these things that we see where the jurors nowadays, because of the way crime is portrayed, require certain things as a prerequisite for a conviction. So it's easy to say when you look at a story and say this person should have gotten a lot more. And then when you find out what the actual circumstances are,
sure,
most of the time I find that people go, geez, yeah, I guess I get that.
Yeah,
you didn't have a cooperative witness. You didn't have physical evidence because the gun was destroyed or
the guy threw the gun in a river.
Right.
That was my,
never recovered the gun.
That was my self-defense case that I get to speak about is, I mean, hey, what'd you do with the gun? Where'd you buy the gun? And he literally said the hood. And they had him repeat it, so there's no background checks on the hood. What'd you do with the gun? I threw it in a river. Did you call 911 after your shooting? No. So, Let me ask you. We said we're not going to name names because that's part of it. We're not going to name names, but when I can go on Iowa courts and say, okay, and you can go read news stories in the local media if you want to. You know, so let's say a kid that's like 12 or 14 years old and starts showing up on the radar by creating some bombs and using them recklessly, right? Explosives. And then, let's see, you can go on Iowa courts and come all the way from 2006 to currently and read things like reckless use of a firearm, assaulting an officer, shots fired, assault, domestic abuse with injury, assault with injury, assault and use during the display of a dangerous weapon. And okay, that guy's not in jail. That guy probably has, I'm going to say technically probably has a carry permit. The point is he's never convicted of any felony. And I came to you personally and said, literally, how the hell does this happen? How is this guy walking my streets and how does he have a carry permit? Do you even remember giving me the answer that I, Ernie, from the guy that tries to act like he knows a little bit what he's doing? I was like, you know what? Wow. And so the point is, and I'm going to tell everybody, is when I said, hey, Nick, if I did all the things this guy did, if I went and beat Mike McAmeals, whatever, I lose my marbles someday and I go over and beat Mike's wife half to death, or I pistol whip her with a...
You better use a different example, man.
No,
She's
I'm
watching right now.
No, this is my example. I go and... Sure.
Yeah.
I go and beat Mike's wife with and literally pistol whip her and break her jaw. How can I not be? I would get thrown the book at me. That's if he didn't kill me. I'm getting the book thrown at me. I'm getting prosecuted. I'm getting put in jail. And I'm like, Nick, why does it happen to me and not to this guy? And you told me what?
I'll try to remember what I told you. So basically, what we deal with, your scenario would involve, potentially witnesses.
Yeah.
That would see your anger
Well, let me
build
go
and
back.
fester, statements that you would make.
Let me give you this out. You said, Ernie, Mike McAmeel and everybody else would testify against you.
Right.
They're not worried about
Right,
Ernie
that's-
killing them.
That's what I...
Or sending a people after them.
Right. So
And
there would be evidence, there would be witnesses, there would be a case against you, presumably because people would cooperate. And so what we get on a regular basis when there's a shooting that takes place, and I won't say regular basis, a regular enough
It's a regular basis.
What we see are situations where there's a reported shooting. Sometimes it may be in the middle of the day, or sometimes it may be at a time at night when there's enough folks out and about, and the police respond, and there's dozens of people standing around, and and those people know that they can tell you a lot about what happened. They can give you a lot of information on that. They may even be able to tell you who the shooter was.
Oh, yeah.
But when the police ask, nobody saw anything.
No.
And that's a cultural thing that occurs in some
Snitches
certain
get
areas.
stitches, man.
Well, that's exactly
Yeah.
it. Is that
Oh,
that
no,
there is,
we talked, yeah.
There is. It's no mystery that in some of the higher crime neighborhoods, there's an animosity between the police and the citizens that are there. And the people that cooperate are often deemed to be snitches, things like that, like you said, Mike, or they're ostracized by some of the folks in the neighborhood. Not to say that there aren't people also in these neighborhoods that are sick and tired of it too.
Oh, they step forward. Some of them.
And God bless them.
Some of them.
That's great. We wouldn't be able to put together cases if people didn't, get a backbone and face down the folks that are causing all the problems. But, some people will just not talk to the police. They just won't do it.
Sure.
It's something that's hard for people to understand, especially folks that are, complaining and making the observations that you made and things like that. And I'm one of them because I grew up in Cedar Rapids. I'm born and raised here, not far from here, where we are right now, actually. And I was taught when I was a kid, you see a police officer, you wave to a police officer, you say hi to a police officer,
Sure.
you talk to a police officer. They're your friends. Not everybody has that same experience or
No.
that same viewpoint.
No.
Because of just maybe things that they've experienced or just the outlook they have on life. I don't know what that is, but they just don't.
Yep.
And so there's that animosity there. And so what you have is you have the police. Well, they're not our friend.
Yeah.
We can't trust them. And if we do cooperate with them, we're going to be looked down upon. And then you have the guy, for example, the guy you're talking about, who has been terrorizing a certain group of people in their neighborhood for a long time, who's intimidating, who always seems to get off because no one will testify against him.
Let me pause
and
you
he's
for-
back. So if you step forward and you provide information to that person, you're visioning your head, but he did this before and he's back in the neighborhood. So you're more scared of the consequences of that person than you are of the
He
police.
doesn't have a pause button. I love it.
Sorry.
The only reason I want to say that is that's you. I'll say an appointed official. You're acknowledging, and so that way people don't just take my word for it. And what I'm saying is there's people that have clout on the street that will make you not talk, correct? They'll make those other people not talk. There's enough of a reputation and I will say factual violence that's happened to witnesses. And that's what, even though I know it exists, that was what was awe-inspiring to me is there's people who are, when I say untouchable, is only if the bad guys catch them. I'm sorry, only if the good guys catch them and have videos and have some type of awesome evidence of that crime, you're not going to get part of like what you said, that culture or that neighborhood that's like, hey, you know what? I'm more afraid of that guy than the police. As in,
right. The only way I'll qualify that is, in my opinion, that's more of intimidation than factual. They've stopped people from talking before.
Absolutely, you're right.
As many people as
You're
I've
right.
dealt with, they're more scared of. And let's say, this person we're talking about here, Joe, whatever. Okay, so
Yeah, Joe.
Let's say Joe's been
Not your
probably
dog.
name.
I was gonna say that guy's a tough little sucker too.
Name a time you can tell me when Joe retaliated against a witness.
Yeah.
Nobody's ever able to.
Nope.
I heard stories, this, that, and everything. Like
Urban legends.
it is. They've just been able to terrorize and intimidate folks enough, or the culture aspect gets into it, where it's just not it's not good to talk to the police. You can't trust them. Those type of things that happen. That it goes. Yeah, those folks believe there's more consequences than in reality there actually will be. And I've had a lot of conversations with people that we've been able to turn them to say, yes, I know what happens, and that, yeah, and then it's just going down the road with some of those folks just to say, there's no proof this has happened. I haven't seen it happen in my number of years.
Yep.
I can't tell you a case of why I prosecuted involved in that, and then remind that the greater good of the citizen are involved here. This is not just you, like, I'm helping the police. You're helping your community.
Yeah. You're
And
helping
that
your own
works
kids,
with
your neighbors'
people,
kids, everybody.
Yeah, that investment in the community aspect of it. I can recall a time when I was doing an interview of a witness who is not friendly, to me, not friendly to police, didn't want to be there, just felt like he'd been mistreated in the past. Maybe he was, I don't know. That didn't matter to me, but he was not at the time a cooperative person, and I stepped in and I started asking him questions about it. And I switched place with the officers. Instead of watching them in the other room, I went in and they watched me. And I talked to them and I said, this isn't about you don't trust the police or whatever it may be. This is about, don't you want to have safe streets for your kids to walk on? Don't you want it to stop living in fear of people? Don't you want Cedar Rapids to be a good place? This is my goddamn hometown. And I know you care about this place too.
Yep.
You're raising your family here.
Yep.
May have been his hometown too. I don't remember, but that doesn't make a difference. You're here. We're living in this place together.
Yep.
And he coughed it up.
Yeah.
Identified people, and then afterwards, I asked the officers, "Well, what do you think was the difference?" And they're like, "Maybe that hometown stuff."
Yeah. And so you set this up perfectly. Second mole. People look to me, and that's it. I'm a nobody. I'm just saying I run my mouth about certain things, like get involved and do this. So they're like, hey, what can we do? What can the community do? What can the law-abiding citizens that follow my page and shop at my store and everything else, what can they do to help?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Isn't it? Got any suggestions?
Be good citizens. Relay facts, not legends.
Yeah.
Make sure what you're talking about when you talk openly about this represents the truth, the things that you've witnessed yourself, things that you can talk about, relate personal experiences, talk about Cedar Rapids as a community.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think has changed a lot about Cedar Rapids from when I was a kid, 30 plus years ago, is that there was no place in Cedar Rapids. There was maybe one or two that you could stretch, say you don't go there.
Yeah.
Now there's, a handful, maybe more. You don't go there.
And there's
That's
no
dangerous.
one place. Yeah.
But and some of that I wouldn't recommend it at certain times just because of what I do, and maybe I'm kind of like, jaded by that. But really, there's good people everywhere.
Yeah.
There's good people that care about their town everywhere. Let's not talk about our town in that way anymore.
Yeah.
Let's not talk about the fact that there's bad people in bad neighborhoods there is. That's a reality, but there's good folks there too.
Sure.
Start thinking about it as a community.
Yeah.
Start saying how can we stop this in a way that acknowledges that there are folks in those neighborhoods that are just as scared as you are living miles away from it, watching it happen, saying, well, that's what's wrong with that neighborhood. What's
Yeah.
wrong with what's going on there? You know,
Yeah.
that's people that you kids might go to school with. That's somebody that your kids may end up at a party with someday or whatever it may be. You know, I mean, we just have to start talking about things in more of a community way. And
You know, I went to that open, whatever it was, open to the public, open forum. I went and listened to our Linn County, Linn County Supervisor, Stacy Walker speak, and some other people. And so this is just my experience. And it was something you spoke of, which I want to make sure people understand was very real, is there was several community leaders and people that want to be involved and are involved and just other, is to listen to them speak openly to the Cedar Rapids Police Chief saying, you need to change your ways about coming into our neighborhood. You know, you need to not come in uniform, and you need to realize that you need to just be, you know, you need to have your officers involved in our after-school basketball games, or, you know, and when I say I get it, is like you said, you were raised to say the cops were our friends. You had a problem, you go to a cop. You never worried about going to a police officer. Police officer, see, my dad would hit me for saying cop. So, but I find it interesting that they're treated like, are they the bad guys? You know, and it's like you need officers in the community, but you're telling them not to show up in marked cars and not wearing uniforms. I can't even start to wrap my mind around how that's not acceptable. Like, you know, you and I look at that as a good thing, don't we?
Well, yeah. I mean, and I honestly look at it as it's a two-way street. You know, every compromise or culture change or anything, whatever word you want to use, requires cooperation, and it can't be a one-sided conversation. You can't just say, hey, we don't want marked cars and we don't want policemen in uniform, without giving something as well. Like, they need to be out there and encourage these kids to cooperate with the police.
Sure.
And you know, whatever, right? I'm not going to solve the world's problems right now, but it's a two-way street.
Isn't
what I'm
that,
saying.
is that a part of it, though? I mean, are there suggestions, too, for the community response? Or
Well,
is it just, I'm not as familiar with the...
Well, this, like I said, this is just factually what happened that I witnessed, and I'm not going to name the community leaders because enough people know them, but here, and I'm there, and I'm here to admit that it's like their suggestions are all about what law enforcement needs to change to stop the community violence going on. And I get pissed off about that because it's not the police running around shooting up this town. It's not the police running around murdering people. The police are not the problem, but I still am willing to sit there and listen to say, well, what do you think's going to help then? And even though I think they're way, way over here and they need to come way more toward the middle than the other people, is at least they're there. Like, even though I didn't like what some people said, I'm like, you know what? They're here on their own time, not getting paid, voicing what they think will help. So I'm willing to sit down and listen to that. Not that I'm anybody, but I mean, I want something to change in Cedar Rapids, Linn County, whatever. I want the culture of violence to change, which is no different than Baltimore or LA or any other town or Davenport or Waterloo. But I have to focus on, this is where my family is. This is where my friends are. This is where my business is. So all we can do is start small, start local. And if all we could do is change the crime in Linn County, we'd be doing awesome. But generically, what do we do? What do we do? And like you said, be a good citizen, speak up if you see something. But I get frustrated when I go and listen to the, hey, here's the 12-step, what's it called, Iowa Justice Alliance or whatever. Hey, here's the 12 steps that law enforcement need to change, or here's the things they need to do. I guess I get turned off by that because they're not the people running around committing crimes. They're not selling Xanax pills and shooting people over stealing those Xanax pills. And I get frustrated by that. But I don't want to get so frustrated that we can't sit down as a community and say, how are we going to make it a better place? I mean, and it is nothing we're going to solve here today, but I just wanted people to be aware of your caseload's amazing. The violence that goes on in this town is amazing. And like you said, let's quit talking about a bad community. I agree. Let's talk about the good things, because there's not a neighborhood in this. I live on the southeast side. People talk about southeast side Cedar Rapids all the time. There is good people everywhere. I just simply want them to start outnumbering the bad people. And I want them to have a safe way to reach out to you.
I think they do.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, do you think you don't think the good people outnumber the bad people already?
They outweigh they greatly outweigh the bad people. I want it to become like a 99-to-1 ratio.
Right.
And I want them to have feel safe and go into their police and talk, and whoever it is. And I know there's people that go to their...
Maybe they just need to be, like Nick said, be more involved, right? You want more people good people to be
I
involved.
want everybody involved. Just like we want everybody taking medical class and carrying tourniquets.
You have to be a good citizen of it. You have to have knowledge, right?
Sure.
And you have to be proactive. So those things all go into being, making a good community.
We have to be careful, I think, too, and I'll probably be called a snowflake for this. I don't know, but
I like calling you a snowflake.
That's funny. I've been called a snowflake, and I've also been called, oppressive too. So I must be doing something right.
You make everybody mad, right?
I personally, if anybody
be
uses
careful.
the term snowflake, like they actually mean it and not as a joke, like my brain just goes, I'm like, you don't have the intelligence to. Like,
but we got to be just careful about the language we use. I mean, there's the accusational, divisive tone that people use, the generalizing that goes on. This is a police problem.
Yeah.
No, it's not.
No, the
that
police
easy.
deal
And
with the result
I don't know that people
of the problem.
think that either. I don't know that people actually think they're suggesting that it's just a police problem. They're just tackling it from that standard. Hopefully, there'll be some follow up, or is some follow up going on too but we play a role as well as a community.
I know very few people in the community that think the police is the problem. But,
I agree.
And I want to point out, like, I don't care if you're pro police or not, but I mean, the funny thing is, police are nothing more, and I mean this lovingly, than a reactionary force. I mean, they show up because something happened. I'm worried about the things that are causing the something to happen.
True to a certain extent. I mean, community policing and being involved in the community is proactive, and that in that sense, what I see is that's already being done.
Well,
I mean, I've talked to the chief personally. It's been a while about this particular topic, and say you have got some great officers out there that are community place heroes. I mean, they know everybody. They're respected. And there's a lot of pride that's worn with that. And I don't think it takes somebody necessarily to show up in a basketball jersey to play basketball after school as an officer to accomplish that. In fact, there may be some worth to the fact that, here I am in my police uniform as a police officer. I want to be a part of your community as a police officer. I want to
Absolutely.
wear a uniform and act like I am for the day. Police are part of the community.
Yep.
So I guess I need to learn more about that particular, whatever that might be. But, and then forcing police to live in the communities where they police. I mean, that's kind of a personal liberty issue, too. I mean, you can be a police officer and live in the country. You can be a police officer and live in the city.
Yes.
Again, you're all part of the same community when it comes down to it. You all care about the same things.
Yeah, I guess I get frustrated, and I'm not. I shouldn't say I'm not asking your opinion, but when I read like the 12 suggestions for, from the Iowa Justice Alliance, whatever, when I read things like, well, they need more diversity in their police force, they cannot force people to apply for a job. They can only work with whoever applies there and pass whatever tests. And so I get frustrated by that. And then trying to tell a police officer you have to live. First of all, police officers already live within a reasonable distance because they got to respond to work and all that, but. Who wants a job where it says you have to live in this town? Find me if Rockwell says, oh, you can work for us, but you have to live in the Cedar Rapids city limits. You can't take your money and go buy 40 acres in the country. Everybody say, screw you, I'll go work for some other company.
That may not quite be apples to apples, though, because you don't get to carry a gun and arrest people when you work for Rockwell. So admittedly, there's a different little set of standards.
Hey, you bring up something interesting, too, is...
I'm not saying it as a criticism towards police. I'm just pointing
out
the fact that
not at all.
Everybody knows I'm a big supporter of the police.
But you bring up something interesting. Is I tell everybody is like, hey, if you had a job that involved making some people mad by doing your job, doing it absolutely correctly, but it still ends up in them going to jail or whatever. Yeah, there you go. Is it so wrong that so many of those officers say, you know what, I'm going to go live in this little community or here. So when I walk around shopping with my kids at the store, it lessens the idea or the actual factual chance that I'm going to run into somebody that I arrested, who in the back of a squad car said, I'm going to kill your family if I ever find you, blah, 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 blah. How often do you hear those recordings?
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
does it happen? Do they threaten to beat up and kill police officers?
Those particular recordings don't make the news because that's just daily stuff. But
you're not. Hold on, Nick.
Scenario,
you're not kidding, are you?
No.
People threaten to kill the police officers for arresting them, taking them to jail.
I'm not going to say daily, but I see it enough where I'm comfortable
monthly?
saying it's
weekly.
It's a lot more than monthly or even weekly. It happens.
I just want people that are looking at the camera to understand that to where. So why
that's not reported, and it's weird to me that there is some sort of acceptance of that. Like that's okay. Like when nobody thinks it's cool for a police officer to say, hey, I'm going to come back and every day I see you on the street corner, you don't have a job, I'm going to arrest you and take you in for loitering.
Yeah.
Nobody's cool with that.
Nope.
But are we just cool with the fact that people can just
Threaten officers?
and their family?
Sure.
Because if an officer did the first scenario, there would be massive coverage on that.
Yep.
The second scenario happens on a daily basis.
Yep.
And I don't think anybody's cool with that either. But there should be a comprehension and understanding of how
public doesn't know
often
about it.
that happens, and just what is involved with being a police officer. It doesn't excuse bad policing or bad decisions. I mean, there's standards that police need to be held to. But
I don't know cops.
should be-
I don't know any police. See, cop. I don't know any police personally, and I know thousands that don't believe in weeding out the bad apples because they don't want crazy psycho cops who make people so mad that they kill the next cop they meet when it's Mike pulling somebody over in Vinton.
Exactly.
They hate the badge, they hate the uniform, and somebody else created that. I don't know police that don't believe in just like the gun world. We like to hold each other accountable. The grown-up gun world, right?
Yeah, the grown-up gun world.
Yep. So, but policing's the same way, and
we like to count ourselves as part of that group.
The grown-up gun world. Is that the
grown-ups.
name of this podcast? The grown-up
we
gun
should.
world.
You know, I'm
Is that
starting to
new
get
name
revved
now?
up. I'm 2 monsters in. Would you?
Rebranding.
We should do this. How about? Is there any way we can talk you into coming back every quarter?
Sure. Yeah.
How interesting would it be to see what has happened between
You were right
every
when we
time
talked
you're
about
here?
this. There isn't near the amount of
There's
things
way
that we
not
wanted to
enough
talk
time.
about that we got to. So.
Let's see. You covered
We
this.
still have a little time. But
Don't defend property with deadly force.
Right.
You went
Check.
over very well what stand your ground did and didn't do. Hey,
Check.
one thing I got to do this for you and for everybody, and I can make a whole bunch of people pissed off at me. How do you feel about the decision to not be able to carry guns in a courthouse? Let's say courthouse.
That's one we didn't talk about yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's stir the pot.
Yeah. Okay. Well.
How do you feel about it?
Well, I may be a little biased since I work in one every day, but
That's
I'm
why-
not cool with it.
That's why we have you here.
And it's not just because of me personally. I mean, and I don't carry a gun into the courthouse by law right now. I can't either. Even as a prosecutor, that's something that they would have to change. But even if I was able to, I still wouldn't be cool with it. As a prosecutor, as a lawyer, as a party, and this would be a prosecutor, a defense attorney, potentially a witness, a defendant, your back's usually to the people that are in the audience.
Yeah.
You can't see what's going on behind you. You're helpless. Okay. And I know that there's an argument to be made that, a good guy with a gun could save this scenario if he sees someone pull up on you,
Blah, blah, blah,
from the back of the courtroom. But I don't want to risk my life and my children's future on that scenario there. I'm a lot better with the gun being stopped at the door. And you could say that about any place, right?
Sure.
So that's the
Yeah, I
argument.
was just going to ask you, how are we going to reconcile that
right.
with any
can.
other restriction?
You can, but and so you can't have guns in schools by law. Okay,
Yep.
there's not a lot of people running around saying we need to have guns in schools or public parks. And there might be some people that think you should be able to carry a gun to school if you're a teacher and certain,
Sure.
whatever it may be.
There's quite a few of them, honestly.
There's laws for that. We've decided there are certain places in our community where we're not going to allow anybody to have guns besides the people that wear the badges.
Yep.
A courthouse could arguably fit in that scenario. In my mind, does because of the volatility that exists in a courthouse and every day. In a lot of places where we go, we have a choice to be there on a regular basis, whether it be the grocery store, the park, to a certain extent, school.
But you're going to work.
I'm going to work. And a witness who has been subpoenaed, let's say the person that we bent over backwards, gave the good citizen speech to, said, you're going to be cool. Everything's going to be fine and dandy here if you show up to testify. But hey, when you come down to testify, there might be somebody with a gun in the gallery.
Yeah.
Okay, bye-bye case.
Yep.
The intimidation factor way up on that.
Sure.
Okay, every week, I don't know what day of the week they do it now, but we do our civil domestic abuse hearings there. So you've got a woman and her man that, feel so threatened by their intimate partner that they want the court to issue a no contact order because they've been beaten, they've been abused, whatever it may be.
Sure.
But that particular individual who has a right to have their hearing. Maybe they didn't do it or whatever, but maybe they did.
Yep.
And brings a gun in there, doesn't care who the hell, sees what happened. They're going to end this once and for all.
Sure.
You're saying pie in the sky type of scenarios, but does anybody want to risk their life on that? You
Yeah.
know,
No,
I
and
mean, there's a courthouse
you-
is a different scenario than
You
the
and I-
grocery store, than the pawn shop, than the you name it, whatever it may be. There's people that are there involuntarily. There's judges that have to make decisions. This should be free of intimidation. There's prosecutors that should be able to make decisions free of intimidations.
Sure.
There's witnesses that need to tell the truth and not have it be
Yeah.
at all persuaded or.
I'm in the back row
influenced.
staring at you when you're on
Right,
the stand. Sure.
Right. We had a melee ensue at a jury trial about a year ago, a double homicide trial outside the courthouse, and it took place in the view of jurors. Okay,
Yeah.
so this is probably the best example here.
Okay.
Jurors are people, like just regular folks.
Yep.
Nobody ever really wants to be on jury duty. And if somebody does want to be on jury duty, I'm immediately questioning what their agenda
They're
is.
probably retired.
You know, like why? What is
your
your agenda? What do you want to do? Because it's probably not proper. I'm
Yeah.
just joking, but jurors are the best example of that. I mean, coming in there, they want to be sure that they're going to be in a safe environment. And folks, I know gun owners and gun carriers are the first to tell you, and many of them are very safe and responsible with that. But
Some aren't.
there is also a right in this country to not have a gun too. I mean, there's certain scenarios where people have a right to feel safe. And
So let's play devil's
Anyway.
advocate. You and I agree on this very much. And so, like I told you, remember, not woe is me. Like you said a while ago, don't feel woe is me because I'm saying this. I don't care that people aren't going to like me for saying this. I don't care if I can carry in a courthouse or not. That's very unpopular with some people. But but I told you, when I say I also understand people saying, well, Ernie, I understand you mean we can't carry it in a courtroom and we never could, like the courtroom. But why can't I go into Jones County Courthouse and renew my plates? Why can't I go there and I'm talking to the tax assessor or whatever?
Very, very similar to an airport where you cannot get in the security area,
Sure.
but you can walk around the main
Yeah.
terminal.
So I'm going to go back to the idea. And when I say to those people, I understand what you mean, but if you think you need a gun to go renew your plates, then do it by mail, because you can do that, by the way. Just don't even go to that scary building. And people in the gun world can get mad, but it's the same lecture of if you think you need a gun to go to a particular place, don't go to the particular
However,
place.
I will take
Sure.
exception to that, right?
Go ahead.
So if you have to go to a place
There you go.
to do business,
Sure.
you should be afforded the opportunity to have whatever tool you need to defend yourself.
Okay.
Outside of, I mean, I understand the courtroom and like a volatile area, but going to get my license plate, that's no different to me than going to Walmart or anywhere else.
Yeah.
I should be afforded the ability to have what tools I need.
And and here's how I talk out of both sides of my mouth. The problem we look at is I understand no guns in the courtroom because there isn't anyway, right? Like,
Right.
unless, well, some judges allow officers, some judges don't. Some people don't realize that. Some judges say you won't have a gun in my courthouse. Like, did I ever feel scared for my life during that murder trial? No. There's armed deputies sitting there in the back row. They got foam seats to sit on. I didn't. But the whole point was, I'm not worried about that. And I don't care what part of the gun world calls me a traitor or whatever. I don't care if I can't carry a gun inside the courtroom. And I also understand on your behalf that if people say, okay, well, fine, I won't be in the courtroom, but I should be able to go inside the courthouse. Let's think of it factually. How many courtroom doors are there? It was mind-boggling to me. Like 20, 60, however many different.
yeah,
They all have dual sets of doors, and there's like 8 of them there, right? So we can't have deputies and a metal detector. You can't go and put that in front of every one of those doors instead of just having one at the main entrance that you man with 2 people.
And I understand that. However, I get I have a problem with what I call in my own mind I've labeled de facto gun control.
Yeah.
And that means I have to go about my business day to day, and I can have a gun here, and I can't have one here, and I got to take it off and put it on. I got to change my clothes 5
Sure.
times a day.
Sure.
It shouldn't be that complicated.
well, that's the same way with any right, though.
Right.
I mean, there's your First Amendment rights aren't
I'm
absolute
just
either.
expressing a frustration, I
And
guess.
certainly, your right against reasonable search and seizure is not absolute either, as well.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where I think people get caught up sometimes in a paradigm of thought where they see like, well, I should be able to do this anytime I want because it's my right. Well, yeah, you're right, but you also live in a world with other people.
Yeah.
And so no right is absolute, and that's probably not a real popular thing for a prosecutor to say because I have certain control over charging people with things, but it's all, you use that responsibly, and you just realize that when you live in a society, no right is going to be absolute because you have to live amongst other people. So, we all need to, I think, take into consideration those opposing viewpoints and
we
like
could
I said
have
before, discussion.
Are you telling me there's 4 stakes or there's only 4 minutes? 4 minutes left? Yeah.
I got that, man.
Let's talk about politics for those last 4 minutes. No, no, let's not. I don't care what your politics are. I don't even know what your politics are. But the nice thing is, so you have one opinion. I'm kind of in the middle.
Nick makes a fair point.
No, and but the point is, we can talk about it.
Society's got to coexist together.
Yeah.
And a lot of our rights are restricted.
Sure.
Or in some way. I was just saying that it pisses me off a little bit.
Yeah. No, and I get...
Yes, the exercise of other people's rights sometimes pisses other people off, too.
It does.
Yes.
Yeah, but that goes to a larger issue that I think that you and I've talked about before, Ernie, about just the need for maybe a little bit more of a seeing other people's point of view on things,
We need to.
Everybody can have a thought paradigm. Someone's a conservative, someone's a liberal. But most of the time when we get over the name calling and we get over labeling people, we get putting people into certain corners, you're a snowflake, you're a nut, whatever, that we find that, that besides save a few people, we all sort of agree on basic things. Well, just like, in the community, the divisive talk, puts people on sides when there's really a hell of a lot of room in the middle just to figure out how to do this together.
Yeah, there is. I agree with you. Like the thing I went and listened to, I tried to tell myself, they're all here because we want to be safer. We might completely disagree how to get there, but it's really people who cared enough to say, I want to be safer, I want my family to be safer. I'm going to come listen to this talk and ask questions. 30 secontions, 12 seconds? Talk to me, boss. 2 minutes?
2 minutes.
I can do a lot in 2 minutes or very little, however you want to look at it.
I was gonna, maybe a question for the next time Nick comes in. I was really curious about the recent change kind of in social norms, understanding are there different laws when it happens to women, when confrontation, when you have a man coming towards a woman, or these things that need
You mean
to be
a disparity of force?
A disparity of force. I don't know if everyone understands that or can appreciate it. And is it even more heightened now with the social movement that's going on?
So in 3 months, we're going to talk about disparity of force and women being attacked. Unfortunately, we'll have some real cases between now and then.
That's actually why I brought it up.
I like it. We're going to
talk
talk
about
about
segue to that, right?
Let's do that. We'll talk about that. I have he knows personally. I have a female friend who went through some horrendous things here in Cedar Rapids, and she's going to come on. We'll have her on the same show. That'll be fun.
Oh, good.
She's already agreed to come on, but we had to wait for the case to be over, of which they pled the other day. Yeah. Damn, people are pleading it down all the time. He only got 25 years.
Yeah. 25 years on a state case of any kind on a plea agreement is pretty amazing.
That's why I told you, and I told her, coming from you, is like, hey, a given 25 years he'll plead to it, that's a win.
Yeah, and one thing we didn't talk about that we'll flesh out either is just like we talked about a mountain.
Yeah.
We talked about the mountain of building a case.
Yeah.
And a little bit about the mountain of getting it to trial.
Yeah.
There's a mountain of the burden of proof. There's a mountain of making sure a judge agrees with the jury's verdict. There's a mountain that involves the appeal process and some of the
So Iowa's not as flat as people think. There's mountains.
There's mountains everywhere.
Man.
Yeah. Yeah, how about that? Mountains, valleys, gravel roads, whatever.
Well, Nick, thank you. This has been awesome, and I really do hope you'll come back. And we'll have my friend on here in the next show. We'll figure out how to have like 5 cameras. This will be awesome. I'll buy you some equipment. Let's roll with it. As Bill O'Reilly said, no, I won't repeat what he said. So, Nick, thank you very much. I think you're doing a great job. I'll support you. You let me know how I can help. You let me know what you want to educate the public about.
Likewise.
Mike, thanks for power sliding in here. Shane, do I have like 4 seconds left, 12 minutes? What do we do? Can we sign off anytime we want? All right. So I want to remind everybody, thanks for all of you that did watch. Thanks for all the good questions. Sorry if we didn't get it to it. And yes, we're going to have him back. So think of things for next time. And if you have questions you want to ask him in between, ask me and I'll send them to him and I'll get you an answer. Other than that,
Do you have any classes coming up?
I don't know. Hardly enough time to talk
Medical
about.
class, 27th of January.
January 27th.
Be there or be negligent.
January 27th. You can always go to cedarvalleyoutfitters.org, or better yet, find us like teenage girls on Facebook because we're on there all the time.
Medical class. Quit smoking and you're too fat.
Yes.
Right. Well, that's the beginning. I'm going to lead off with that.
For a full circle
all right,
here,
everybody
gentlemen.
knows, quit smoking and you're too fat. All right, now let's go.
I'm in that club. Other than that, can I sign off? Can I tell them how much I love them?
All right.
Thanks for joining us very much. And as always, watch out for the red Chevy truck.
Peace out.
Peace out.